Who would win in a fight? A heavily armed and armored knight, or an unassuming peasant woman? If you guess the knight, then you are sorely mistaken. For during the 17th century in England, it was the peasants that were far more likely to end up dead. But don't worry, because in today's video, we're gonna find out why. Welcome back to the channel. This is the most terrifying job interview in history. In 1645, as the English Civil War rages on, a young man named Matthew Hopkins is desperate to find a way to make money. And when he hears there's a growing demand for witches to be put to death, he seizes on the opportunity, and so begins the bloody tale of England's first official witch. Hunter. Traveling from village to village with a couple of assistants, Hopkins would put on a show for the locals, claiming to have special powers. He would then accuse random townspeople of being witches and demand they be put to death. Now, don't get me wrong, accusing people of being witches was easy money. But Hopkins wanted to be the very best witch finder in all of England, so he came up with the most ridiculous ways to identify witches. For example, if a woman floated in water, then she was obviously guilty of dipping her bread in the blood of Christ, and therefore a witch. Or if a man had any mole or birthmark on his body, then he must have made a pact with the devil and was consorting with witches. Any suspected witch could also be identified by their abnormal behavior. Did someone refuse to go to church? Clearly a witch. Does someone enjoy dancing? Guilty as charged. Has someone been gossiping about you? Well, that's just malicious slander, of course. But these ludicrous accusations didn't matter to Hopkins and his goons because they had a foolproof method of extracting confessions. Sleep deprivation, you see. Hopkins would put his alleged witches in stocks and keep them there for days on end, forcing them to listen to nothing but the crackling of a nearby fire. Eventually, they would confess to anything to make it stop, and once they did, Hopkins would have them put to death, sometimes in front of the entire village. And while these confessions were enough to satisfy most towns, Hopkins knew he could do better. He started demanding that villages pay him a massive fee. £20 to cleanse their town of witches. And considering the average annual income at the time was around £100, this was no small amount of money. And sadly, many villages agreed. But before long, Hopkins had made such a name for himself that people were lining up to have him come to their village. He would arrive with a crowd of men, women, and children, all eager to see the so-called witch finder in action. And they didn't have to wait long. Hopkins and his goons would start rounding up people at random, accusing them of being witches, and torturing them until they confessed. And yet somehow this still wasn't good enough, you see. Hopkins started working on a book detailing his exploits, one that he hoped would make him famous. He wrote about how he uncovered a vast network of witches across England, all of whom were conspiring to overthrow the government. And he described in detail the confessions he extracted. Even though most of them were likely false, by the end of 1647, Hopkins claimed to have executed over 300 witches, and then just as suddenly as he had appeared, he vanished. Some say the real witches finally got their revenge, but you'll have to decide for yourself. Now, if you enjoyed this dark animated tale, then be sure to check out the series in the description. And as always, thanks for watching.